In our second road upset of the college football playoff, Miami comes in to Texas A&M, College Station, and they get a win, which was not on my bingo card to see both road teams pull out victories. But in a defensive slugfest, a final score of 10-3, Miami is able to kind of out ugly A&M in our group chat yapping. It's us and a bunch of our college friends. People, Jack, our co-host, referred to as a mid-off, which was, just kind of, I feel like an Aggie fan accepting his fate, the battered Aggie syndrome really doing its work. But really just not a high scoring game, not flashy by any means, but still an entertaining game. JP, what were your takeaways and your thoughts?
Well, um, you feel bad for Aggie fans because, like I was just saying, they unfortunately got put in this spot where they had to play a really talented team in Miami in terms of the players that they have in the first round instead of getting to play Tulane or James Madison. And you could argue it's their own doing. They should have went and won at Texas to guarantee the SEC championship spot, more than likely guarantee the top four seed, and they wouldn't be in this spot. But still, I think there was plenty of argument for them to be in the six and not be where they are, one spot higher. And unfortunately, that cost them. At the same time, though, they cost themselves in this game. Not being able to run the football is a huge one. A&M had been able to run the football pretty much on anyone all year. And Miami really, really shut them down. The Marcel Reed is the leading rusher in this game. He goes 15 carries for 27 yards, sacked a few times in this game as well. And then Ruben Owens, Le'Veon Moss returns, and then you have EJ Smith as well. But those three guys combined for 18 carries and 50 yards on the ground. That's just not good enough. With the offensive line that they had, they lost the battle against this front of Akeem Mesidor, Ruben Bain, and others for the Miami Hurricanes. One of the best offensive lines in football in Texas A&M ends up losing that battle in this game. And so you're forced to put yourself in a spot where you don't want to be. If I told any Aggie fan, you're going to go into this game and Marcel Reed's going to throw the ball 39 times. And in fact, he's going to have plays that end with him touching the ball, either throwing the ball or being sacked or rushing 54 times. He's going to have 54 different plays in this game that affect the game. I think you would be scared, very, very scared, especially against this Miami defense. He throws it 39 times. He has two picks. He runs it 15. He has a fumble in this game, and they were all critical, critical plays in this game. The fumble ends up stopping what would have been more than likely a scoring drive as they're inside the Miami 30. The interception to start the second half is a critical one as it happens on your own side of the field. Thankfully, Miami misses a field goal right after that, and of course the interception to close the game, which just felt like it was going to happen. Because when they got down there on the goal line, which first of all, great credit to them, but first and goal from the 5, because you've wasted a lot of time and you don't have the timeouts available to us, 33 seconds left and it's first and goal from the 5, you have to throw it essentially 4 times. That's just not cause for success. It's just not with the field being so shrunk down and with the players that they have, speed threats and Mario Craver and Casey Concepcion, they didn't have a guy to throw the jump ball to in those key moments. And so Marcel Reed is forced to make a read and throw it over the middle of the field, and that's being what cost them the game. I think A&M lost this game, and that's the only way. That's the only takeaway I really have is the big one is just A&M lost themselves this game. I don't think Miami made enough plays, but Miami was not trying to win the game. Clearly, they were running the ball well with Mark Fletcher. He runs for 170 yards, but Carson Beck threw for just over 100. They really had only one option outside of Mark Fletcher and Malachi Toney in this game, and he has a critical fumble as well in this game. And then, of course, the field goal troubles. They missed, what, three? Yeah, 3 field goals in this game in critical spots. I know it was a windy day, but Miami was not trying to win this game. It was all right there out in front of A&M. And unfortunately for them, they were put in the reality of Marcel Reed has to go and beat the Miami Hurricanes because they couldn't run the football. And that's just not a formula for success. It's not going to be a formula for success for them this year. If Marcel Reed returns in the future, which is a huge conversation now, and that's unfortunately reality. Like we just had the conversation about John Mateer. That conversation would not be had prior to COVID. Like that, we would just say, okay, Marcel Reed's coming back next year. Okay, John Mateer's coming back next year. Now it's well, with the money that A&M and Oklahoma have, you could just move on from Marcel or John Mateer if you wanted to, even with the seasons that they had. Even with both of them being like Heisman contenders, one of them being a front runner and one of them being like he was probably going to New York. And then the season flips and all of a sudden you might not want your fan base might not want you to play quarterback for you anymore. It's just unfortunately the reality of the sport. But you got takeaways from this game before we break down the two teams?
Yeah, so I mean that's one of
Looking
the
forward.
things that I have talked about with Marcel Reed being a redshirt sophomore. Um, he starts last year his redshirt freshman season, and I'm a State fan, and so maybe my view of how fans treat their own players is a little bit by changed by how our fans do. But I mean, we are a fan base where unfortunately we have booed our starting quarterbacks so they don't play good enough. Like we can be very quick to judge our own players, our own jerseys. And so I asked Jack and I asked you about this. I was like, I think there's a possibility that if Marcel Reed tries to play here at A&M or play there at A&M, not here because I'm not an A&M fan, but play for A&M for the next 2 years, that they could sour on him very quickly, just because I can't even think of um, like how of players in college football now that started at the same place for 4 years. I think about guys, K. Klubnik, but I feel like that Clemson fan base is soured on him. I know that our good friend Duncan, a big Clemson fan, soured on Cade a lot. Um, and that's just kind of the first one that comes.
Arch is probably going to start 4 years, maybe.
Yeah, he might, and I think that Texas fans maybe they're just too blinded to sour on him. That might just be um,
Last name carries
yeah,
a ton.
that may not actually happen. Which it would be funny if they end up not souring on him just because they are so blinded, because he did not have a great season, did not live up to the hype that he had coming into his name. But Marcel Reed throws 2 interceptions, 0 touchdowns, and so just this is the kind of performance that I was worried would lead to A&M fans potentially being out on Marcel Reed and pushing him out before he's able to give a full 4 years there. The 2 interceptions, it was just not a great performance by him, and it felt like a game. It just wasn't a good sign when I spent the whole game thinking that A&M was going to need a defensive touchdown to win. That's not what you want to be thinking when you're watching the game. Is if they don't get a pick six or if they don't get a punt return for a touchdown, I don't think they're going to win. And that's kind of how the offense looked. And you talked about it. It was a run game. It was the interceptions, just not great at all. And we talked about it in the preview about how one of the things we thought would impact the game a lot would be the loser. Not the loser. The loser would have the worst quarterback play. We talked about Carson Beck and his turnovers that he's thrown this year, the games that he's had against SMU and Louisville, I believe. Last year, some of the games that he had at Georgia, and his just tendency to not play his best against the best opponents. And then we talked about Marcel Reed's interceptions, and Marcel Reed wins the interception battle, 2-0. He throws his 2 turnovers, and Carson Beck is able to stay clean in that stat. So I think that's kind of a big takeaway is we were right on the quarterback situation. Now I don't think either of us were expecting a 10-3 outcome. I think we were expecting maybe like 28-21 with a couple picks from each side. But
I mean, and not necessarily. I kind of felt coming into the game. I know I said it on the Thursday show that I felt like this game was going to be lower scoring than the Alabama Oklahoma game. It really kind of profiled as a defensive slugfest because even though you have all the explosive players on both sides, you have quarterbacks that are prone to turning the ball over anywhere on the field, literally anywhere. And so that meant that drives were going to stall. Now, I didn't expect Miami to miss 3 field goals, and that's the reason their drive stalled. But Marcel Reed turning the ball over 3 times was completely in a spot for this game. I think early on in this game, while Marcel hadn't turned the ball over yet, Miami felt, I think, on their sideline that, oh, we can just win this game with our defense. And Pate, I'll give him the credit for it, but it can't not be stated that last year we're talking about Miami as a team that can't stop a nosebleed.
Yeah.
They couldn't stop Syracuse. Syracuse just went up and down the field on them. Haynes King went up and down the field on them, and that's their two losses in ACC play. This year, they've completely turned it around from a defense perspective. They were losing games because Carson Beck was turning the ball over. And so I think maybe early on in this game, it might have been the game plan altogether, is they came into this game and said, if we can run the football to some kind of degree, let's maximize, or I should say minimize, the amount of times that Carson Beck has to throw the ball.
Yeah.
And so he only throws it 20 times in this game. And so you're able to avoid the interceptions that way. You're able to avoid him turning the ball over and him losing the game. And that is because they've turned that defense completely around from last year. And it cannot go understated. It is a tremendous turnaround. It's like the Oklahoma turnaround, except Oklahoma went from Lincoln Riley and no defense. They switched coaches, and that was a huge part of it. Mario Cristobal's still there. That Miami staff is pretty much the same for the most part. They've really turned it around this year. They've had, of course, huge playmakers, a top 5 pick, Ruben Bain, probably another first-round pick in Hakeem Mesidor. But that defense won them the game. And that
Yeah.
is something I don't think if you told a Miami fan last year that was going to happen the following year, I don't think they would believe you, considering how the defense played last year, where it was another one of those defenses that failed on a potential Heisman quarterback and a top 5 pick, like the Jaden Daniels LSU defense. Cam Ward was no different last year with Miami. So the turnaround that they had needs to be praised. I have fully praised. Their defense won them this game entirely because their offense was not trying to, clearly, with all their missed field goals and mishaps. That turnaround is impressive. And I know coming into this game, no, there's no Miami fans in the chat, so there's no one to point me out. But I said I felt like they had to prove that they were back. They had to prove that this was the brand that they had been in the early, or the very start of the 2000s and the 90s, a brand that we have never seen be that elite. We've seen them get to spots. We've seen them make the ACC championship game and then flame out. We've seen last year with Cam Ward, them having a Heisman Trophy winner but no defense, and he loses to Syracuse and Georgia Tech on the road. What a turnaround for them. And they have a tremendous opportunity to go be competitive with Ohio State and maybe really, really turn around the Miami Hurricane brand. And the other thing was, I felt like coming out of this game that one of these two teams, had they had played well, could maybe compete with Ohio State. I don't feel that way.
Yeah.
I think you were right in that case. I'll give you credit there. I don't think either of these teams are, especially Miami, since they're the team advancing. I think they're going to need a lot of defensive help to upset the Buckeyes in Jerry's world.
Yeah, I'm really glad you said that because I had that in my brain. It's a point I wanted to bring up was y'all's point last or on Thursday about how like there's a possibility that the winner of this game looks impressive enough that either Jack or JP, we might pick them to beat Ohio State next week. And I was like, I don't know what y'all are expecting to see, but that is not what I expect to see. And I think we got more of what I expected to see. Two good football teams, really good football teams, but not a top football team from either Miami or Texas A&M. And so, yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up because I'll be interested to see. We've got spreads already. Do you know what they are?
That's the biggest spread of the second round, is that game between Ohio State and Miami. That spread is 9.5. It's 10 in some spots. It is the biggest spread. The closest spread is Oregon Texas Tech. The other two games are touchdowns, but this is a 9.5 point difference between these two teams. This is the biggest spread of the second round.
Yeah, I think I will comfortably say I will not be picking Miami to cover 9.5 against Ohio State. I mean, Miami, if depending on how that offense plays, they might just not score. Miami also, I mean, this was a funny moment that I just want to share for everyone who's watching. So Miami has that it was a long pass that no, it was a punt return, long punt return, could have been a touchdown. No one, I didn't see anyone else talk about this, but I was frustrated by the lead blocker who's just like, you know, airplane into the end zone with his guy behind him who gets shoestring tackled. I was like, if you turn around and make that block, like just chip the punter as he passes by you, you do score there. So the lead blocker is out in front, shoestring tackle. Later on in that game, we were talking about, oh, well, it could have been a lot worse for A&M. I mean, Miami could have had a touchdown there. Instead, they come away with nothing because that was one of their many missed field goals. That was just a funny moment because Jack and I think Morton, Cromie might have been in there as well, saying that, well, I mean, it really could have been a lot better for Texas A&M because we had so many missed touchdowns, and we were like, yeah, but that was a little bit different than like, oh, you got across the 50.
Mhm.
This was a guy that was 3 inches away from the end zone. If that punter doesn't, it was whoever made the tackle. I don't remember who it was, but whoever makes that tackle, if that doesn't happen, then Miami scores a touchdown there. So that was a funny moment
Yeah.
with A&M fans trying to maybe smoke a little copium there and defend how close or how much better it could have been for A&M. Because it did not really feel like that watching it. It'll be an interesting matchup, Miami versus Ohio State next week. Do you have any other takeaways from this game?
I think you just I want to give again with these two games, even with the way this game went as well. It's another for both. Both teams had a very successful season, and they should take away nothing but, um, high feelings for this season. A&M not going 8-4, a tremendous success. Being where they were in terms of a national brand, how they were being talked about as a top three team for the better part of a month and a half. Mike Elko with what he's building there to avoid, at least for now. Look, there's still some buzz. Maybe he goes to Michigan. I don't believe it. I don't believe it, just like you don't believe Kalen DeBoer is going to Michigan. But they have avoided him taking the Penn State job or some other job, and so you're going to get to continue to build there as well. And I think maybe from a development standpoint, you saw a lot of pops. They hit on the transfers in Casey's Concepcion and Mario Craver. Cassius Howell pops up out of nowhere, and now he's going to be a first round pick. Torian York had a tremendous season this year. Their DBs was really their only weakness on pretty much the entire team, outside of maybe running back health. You'd argue with Le'Veon Moss and Ruben Owens even at times. They had a tremendous season, and so all credit to the Aggies. They have a lot to build towards. Again, that conversation is going to come up, and I wish Jack was here because I'd love to have it with them. But we'll have it. I think we'll have it at some point.
We definitely will.
Marcel Reed, is he the quarterback going forward? I think there's going to be some buzz in that fan base because the two losses, in large part, were due to him and his play. Being down 30-3, in large part, was due to his play. Now, that due to his play, though, in the second half, they made the comeback for South Carolina. Due to his play, they end up winning the Notre Dame game on the road because he was electric. So that it's a two-sided or two-edged sword there. But I think there's going to be a conversation for him as the quarterback going forward because it was shaky already coming into the year. We were concerned about his ability to throw the ball down the field, his ability to read a defense, and that showed up in a few key spots this year. So for the Aggies, tremendous season, a lot of questions going forward, a lot of things you have to solve. But they should be on the upcoming. I don't think a lot of people are going to be picking them to go 8-4 next year. Although I don't know the schedule off the top of the head. And on Miami's case,
They have
again,
to go to LSU again. That's the only one I remember because Jack was complaining about having to play there back-to-back years.
they'll host Texas. I know that much. For Miami, they win a playoff game, turn their defense completely around, and they have, like I said, a tremendous chance to really, really change the brand that they have there and really maybe put Miami fully back on the map, which they're already, to a degree, back on the map. But to go out and beat Ohio State is a statement. I don't think we've taken enough weight from what Indiana did in beating Ohio State in the Big Ten championship game yet.
Yeah.
because that has really, really changed the narrative. And Indiana doesn't have the talent profile. They have what, one 4-star, I think, that was a 4-star coming out of high school, and the rest of the guys are 3 stars and transfers coming up. So they made a tremendous statement. Miami's got a very similar opportunity to do that and put them really on the map going forward.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and give my quick prediction for how you talk about Marcel Reed, and we can have this conversation, and Jack can give his thoughts. I'll go ahead and put my thoughts out there really quick. You are one of the most like head driven fans that I know. You are a fan with your head. It's what leads to the jokes about, well, this is what happens when you're a state fan. What do you expect? Expectations. These are all things that happen because you're a fan with your head, and I'm more of a fan with my heart, which those both have their pros and cons, and it creates some really fun conversations and some long, long arguments. I think what we're going to see is head coaches all use their head, and I think that so they'll still be in on Marcel Reed because they'll know that they're not going to find a college football quarterback that's going to go 48 quarters without mistakes. He's not going to go a full 12 games without mistakes. And so they're going to stay invested in Marcel Reed. I expect them to try and keep him. But what I also expect is that fans are going to get to start to like, it could still only be maybe one half every 3 or 4 games, like the Missouri game. But those start to stand out more, kind of like a sore or a scab, where it's like because you start to be aware of them because you've had that season. I think fans he's had this season, and so now they'll be looking for him and ready to like kind of like jump on that whenever it happens and to be more upset about it, more frustrated, and kind of use that as reasons to be frustrated with coaching staff and frustrated with potential losses or even close wins. That's kind of where I expect it to go, and that goes back to I don't expect quarterbacks to be able to start in the same place for 4 years, because if you start somewhere for 4 years, you either weren't good enough to go to the like you weren't good enough to go to the NFL, and if you aren't good enough to go to the NFL for 4 years, like after 4 years, how are you good enough to stay at the same program for 4 years? That's a really hard, tight window to fit in. I don't think there's a lot of guys that can do that, so that's kind of where I land there. I expect the IQ, the coaches to stay invested, but I think the fans will be too emotional like me and start to get fed up with the Missouri quarters or the Miami games.
I think we saw it in a little bit of our conversations in the final 2 games for A&M while they were going on, and that, well, who are you going to play besides him?
Yeah.
So if they bring in some kind of competition, whether it is a recruit or a guy in the transfer portal, then I think that conversation gets a little bit louder. But as Jack would put it, I don't remember his name, but he said, yeah, no way we're throwing the backup out there to play snaps for our team. We're way better off with Marcel. So if there's competition there, I fully agree with you that it becomes a harder conversation because it is so easy to move off quarterbacks in college football. It's not like the NFL where you draft a guy, you have him for 4 years, you sign a guy, no one signs 1-year contracts. Like Daniel Jones is one of the few quarterbacks to sign a 1-year contract for big kind of money. No one signs big contract or small contracts in terms of years. They sign multiple year contracts, and so you're stuck with them. In college football, it's so easy to move off a quarterback. He can move off just like that. We at State have moved off just like that. We've gone from Will Rogers to Mike Wright to Blake Shapen to Michael Van Buren, Mr. President. He's the future. To, oh, we're back to Blake Shapen. Oh, now it's Kamario Taylor. It could be Luke Croman work. It moves. It's so fluid, and it will be no different potentially for A&M if there's competition in that room.
Yeah, I guess that's the thing that we had that this year. We had Kamario Taylor on the bench, 4-star quarterback, and A&M didn't really have that. At least I don't know exactly. It was Miles O'Neill. I don't know where he ranked, or even if he was ranked highly. I mean, he's 7-14, 120 yards, a touchdown, and 2 picks in the games he played this year. So that's kind of, Jack was joking about, well, we're definitely not going to start him. So I agree with that.